Evan, thanks for joining me today on my podcast. I appreciate you.
Pleasure to
Man,
be here. Thank you.
yeah, we were just talking off camera because it's been so long and we've kind of known each other now for a long time. And
Yeah,
I was fortunate enough to be there in your origin story when you first started your company. And
yeah,
as I was going through lists of guests I'd like to have, I thought, man, I'd love to catch up with you anyway, but also
yeah,
like someone I knew at the very beginning and where they are now and how far they've come. We've got a really cool lot of things to talk about, I think.
yeah. It's nice to be on your shortlist. That's awesome.
You are, man. You are.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
cheers.
so tell me about the origin story a bit, and we can start getting into how we met.
Yeah. The origin story. So everyone always presumes, you must have loved rum, you must have drunk it as a kid, all the way back. But it's like I'd never massively loved rum. It was I wanted to
Controversial
start my
hot take
business.
there from the rum owner.
Pardon?
I said hot take from the rum owner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, but I knew I wanted to start a business, and I knew that once I found an idea, I'd then be passionate about that. I didn't have like a specific hobby I wanted to turn into a business. I knew I'd find an idea, and then the passion would come after. So I
Yeah.
used to work in operations for Associated British Foods, run factories, warehouses, distribution, and I wanted to start my own business. I'd wanted to do it for ages. My dad had always done his own thing. Um, I went to uni with a girl called Pip who started Pip and Nut. I'm sure you know her. And I was like, oh, if Pip can like, she didn't have a background in FMCG, but if she can break into a seemingly established, saturated category like peanut butter, um, maybe I can do something. And he's like, she
Yeah.
got a great brand, great product, and has smashed it. And then I started having doubts, thinking, oh, maybe it's just not me. Maybe it's Pip, maybe it's other people, but maybe I'm not really cut out for it. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm just getting cold feet. And I knew the only way was to just take the leap, and either I might detest it and I could just go and get a job again and I'd have tried, or
Mhm.
whether I just need to take that leap of faith and I would love it. And loved it. So yeah, very glad took the leap. And
I I like that honesty there. Can I tap
yeah,
on that a second? Because like
yeah,
a lot of people, like I think it's important to be excited about what you're doing. Obviously, there's a lot
mm,
of people who want to just make money, and I don't think that's the right way
mm,
to approach something.
mm,
But you were like willing to know that I wanted to find the excitement in the building of the thing. It doesn't have to be
mm,
rum or peanut butter
yeah,
or software. It's the
yeah,
building. A lot of people I've met get caught up in trying to make something that sounds sexy and impressive and something they can talk to someone at a
mm,
party about rather
mm,
than actually getting excited about the operations of building something. So
yeah,
it's cool that you
exactly.
recognize that.
The product it happened to be rum was almost incidental, if that's the right word. I wanted to this sort of itch I was wanting to scratch was wanting to like create something. It's what I saw as my my intellectual Everest to summit, to like I've created something. I've come up with something that there's a market need for, that people will love, and that doesn't exist. It's not just putting a tweak on something that's out there, or sort of jumping on, a bandwagon of, a category that's doing well. I wanted to sort of, to me, it was like, oh yeah, I'm clever enough to have spotted something, and done that. And it was sort of, I knew that was where the passion would come. And then building a business was just as important as building the products that the business would
Mhm.
sell. And, worked for firms, and, frustrating processes, and sort of, oh, it's always been done like that. You'll hear that phrase 1,000 times. It's like, oh, it doesn't need to be done like that. Like whatever it is across the, the business. So it was the sort of the beauty of the clean slate, of being able to build up a company that was, it was scalable, because I was a minnow when I started, and slightly bigger now. Um, so sort of scalable, you know, and sort of resilient to, supply chain issues. So sort of all of those bits I took a lot of pleasure in, the sort of creation of it. And yeah, and coming to Rom, and I was looking at 2017. I was looking at trends of 2017, and trying to spot where in the whole market, it wasn't even narrowed down to food and drink at this stage. It was like, where is there something? And the only other idea that had some legs was sort of before Monday.com and all of those became a big thing. it was sort of driven by a pain point of, how do you juggle a to-do list in my old job? Like everyone struggled with it. Like, where do you keep track of everything? And different meeting minute notes that are in different Word docs. And it was just a nightmare. And it was like, well, if you had somewhere, an online place, and also the key thing being that people only ever talked about the deadline for getting something done. They never talked about the doing time. Like it's going to take 2 hours. Where's that 2 hours in the space of time before the deadline? Like that, it
Hmm.
just wasn't a thing. You just
Well,
had
it
to,
was a good idea because after
yeah,
that, you had Notion and ClickUp and Monday
yeah,
and all these other people
yeah.
start to crack that problem. So
And there were
that would have been
loads,
a
and
good one as well to
I
do.
love the idea that you could see all your actions, and if you're a manager, you could see the actions of your team as well. So it's sort of all in one place, and also it could have this sort of red, amber, green. So if you had 10 hours worth of work planned to do on a day that you've only got 8 working hours, it'd be like red. You need to pull something forward, push it back. Um, so it was the first idea I'd ever had that had legs, and I could see a pain point. But the sticking problem was like I couldn't build it myself, not a coder. I'd have to pay someone, so I'd need a lot of money to pay someone, and then I also wouldn't know whether they were doing it, well enough or slick enough, or whether, it was the best or a mediocre job they were doing, because I didn't have any experience. So that was I needed to do something, and on the Venn diagram, it needed to be something that I had some experience of. Um, so I could either do it or manage someone who was doing it. It needed to be like a gap in the market, so there's demand, and then something that would be really fun and enjoyable.
Mm.
Um, and that software one, I couldn't do it, and I wouldn't be able to manage someone who was
So did you
doing it.
actually do a Venn diagram or a SWOT analysis, or did you just kind of inherently doing that in your head and sort of?
Yeah, I was doing that in my head, and then I came up with that sort of Venn diagram mentality sort of in those early days. And I
Yeah.
was I was giving a friend who's a teacher, he'd asked me to come to their like year 10, 11 business studies to give like a little talk on what's it like to start a little business. And that was the first time I actually put the Venn diagram on paper. And in each of the circles wrote that if you only have these two things, this will be a problem. If you have only these two, and then you need it in the middle. If you make the finest golden toast rack in the world, might be beautiful, but like no one's going to buy it. It could be exceptional in its field, but if there's no demand, it doesn't matter how good the thing is. Um, so yeah, I was looking at trends, and then narrowed it down to food and drink. I'd seen that mezcal, the sort of sister spirit of tequila, was growing, but I thought, logistically very
An acquired
difficult.
taste as well, Pascal, isn't it?
Yeah, very acquired taste, logistically very difficult. Um, and also, it wasn't one of the big four spirits of gin, vodka, whiskey, rum. And then, and then I looked at vodka, and I thought, well, maybe I could get some good stuff from Poland or something and put a twist on it. So I was looking at that, and then there's the big scary thing of like, how do you know if people would want it and buy it? And I thought, well, to find out that answer is I need to go talk to some bartenders. And the
Hmm.
idea of going into like an empty bar before it's busy to talk to someone and go, hey, I've got this idea is like embarrassing, and you feel silly and you're like, I can't possibly do that. But as soon as I realized what's far more embarrassing than going into a bar and going, oh, I've got this idea for a vodka. What's far more embarrassing is starting a company with no market research and it failing. That's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
So that helps you get
You know,
over
what you say, it
what
sounds so
you
obvious,
are.
but so many people miss that. They just miss that
Yeah,
basic research. Again, we before we put the recorder on, we were talking about validating ideas and ideas that I've
yeah,
had in the past where I'm interviewing people for a good year, finding that
yeah,
right sweet spot. So you
yeah,
that's because at the time craft gin was definitely a
yeah,
thing. And like they
yeah, yeah,
say, like, if everyone's doing it, you've probably missed the boat. So did you sort of
yeah,
feel that gin, you could be a me too and say, I'm gonna do gin as well, but like you kind of had a
yeah,
thing in your gut, like everyone's doing
yeah,
that. We need to find that next
yeah.
wave. And is that rum? Is
Exactly.
that gin? Is that mezcal? And then that you found that out through the bars, did you?
Exactly. Well, sort of. It was. So I asked the guy about the vodka. I said, put a twist on it, lemon vodka, and he's like, we don't do that much flavored vodka, and when we do want it, we've got Absolute, we've got a couple of the high end flavored ones. We don't really have a need for it. So I was like, okay, there's no demand there. And then it was a couple of things. Um, as you've seen this big gin boom, I then looked at the big four of gin was already booming, vodka had already sort of premiumized. Was that sort of 90s? But it had there were quite a fair few vodkas, and then Raker had come out, and there's quite a few. Whiskey had gone through you know that sort of premiumization as well. So rum was the only one that hadn't really changed in felt like quite a few decades. There
So
was a couple like Duppy Share who were sort of 2015, maybe, not sure, but there was a couple, but largely it was sort of you got your white rums, your Old Navy, some spiced and a few other bits in there, but not much had really happened. So it was like that light bulb moment um, of like one of the big four categories hasn't premiumized. And a couple of other things was um, some sales agents had gone into a pub that I used to work at, and they were saying to the landlord, rum's gonna be, rum's up and coming, and he used to stock literally white Bacardi and Lamb's Navy. That was it.
mhm.
This is 2017, and he was taking on a couple more rums from these guys, and then a couple more in the future. So that was like the first rumblings of okay, rum's coming, and then as you sort of dig in and understand it a bit more, spirits seem to operate in these 8 year cycles from sort of stagnation, innovation, like boom, and then saturation, plateau, and dip. So it's like,
Mm.
okay. And you sort of seen where gin was, and rum was like 4 years behind it. So really, really early days. And those sort of the tiny things like the precursors to a load of new brands would be like, um, classic cocktails, but done with rum instead of their classic spirit. So like a rum old fashioned or like a rum hot toddy. You sort of see them sort of emerging, and then later on there'd be like dedicated rum bars or rum menus. You sort of see all of that, and then there's more innovation from the producers. So the consumers get more into it, and then there's more demand, so there's more supply as well. And you could see this sort of happening. And yeah, as you say, if gin's already happening, it's too late to get into it. And also gin for me, I didn't want to just sort of copy a gin and put a little twist and say, oh, this is very especially Satsuma forward or like something, you get little brands that, they put a little twist on it. And I knew it wouldn't be like unique, and I wouldn't have great market sort of traction because it'd be like, it's a nice gin, but you've added a bit of, you know, yuzu or something. It'd be like, oh,
Mhm.
it's all right. But in terms of yeah, that didn't scratch my sort of my need to like create and invent something, because I'd be sort of getting on the wagon and just putting a bit of yuzu and be like, this is very yuzu and lemongrass forward. Um, and you might do okay in, for a little bit, but as saturation increases, it's sort of it would then get very difficult to get anywhere. But primarily, it didn't sort of satiate that need to create something. Whereas
Yeah.
rum, the category was still way behind gin, so it's sort of slower to get started. But then there's less competition, and also it gave me that satisfaction of what I'd created. Like, that was what I was chasing. Like I've created something, you know, not before, sort of before the need is there, and then you're sort of early on in that wave.
Hmm. It's
So
nice to hear you
yeah.
talk about it in these terms because I'm from a B2B world typically, and we talk about
Mm,
pain and gain for the customer and market
mm,
fit and stuff like that. And it sounds like you do apply these types of things naturally, which is great. But also you're kind of understanding the gut feel to these things because some of it sound like gut feel to a certain
mm,
degree because
yeah.
you did end up when we were talking. So when we first met, we must have met what 7 years ago? Is it that long?
Yeah, must be, yeah. Yeah, yeah, 2017
Like,
must
because
be,
I
yeah.
think you didn't have anything made. You were just like, I'm gonna make. I think you decided you were gonna do a rum. We met at
Yeah,
Virgin, and I think
yeah,
again
yeah,
before we recorded, we're saying we
yeah,
met when I was doing my marketing course for
yeah,
Virgin,
yeah,
and
yeah,
afterwards we just got chatting, and then you
yeah,
said, oh, I'd like some advice on. I can't even remember what it was advice about,
yeah,
maybe branding, marketing stuff. But you were saying, okay, I'm going to make a rum company and get this. I'm going to put some nutmeg in it. I'm like,
No,
crazy.
hazelnut.
Hazelnut,
Hazelnut.
sorry. It was
Yeah,
hazelnut, sorry. Yeah, I know it's
yeah,
obviously
yeah,
hazelnut now, but yeah, you said, so you said hazelnut. I'm going to put hazelnut in it. And just, it partners so well, I promise.
yeah,
So that
yeah,
must have been a gut feel that you knew you needed to come with something taste
yeah,
wise rather than just a spice rum.
yeah. And the flavored one, and it's like for a lot of it, people like with the where it's sort of, yeah, 2 points. That sort of, I quit my job without knowing what the idea was, and you sort of, a lot of people go, "Oh, I'd love to start a business. I haven't had an idea," and this sort of semi-glamorized, oh yeah, not glamorized. You have the light bulb moment, and then you can start it on the side, and then and then transition to it full time. Like that's awesome if you happen to have a light bulb moment, but sometimes you don't. But that's no excuse for not doing it.
Hmm.
Like I knew that I wouldn't have any smart ideas whilst I was still working this big job. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go look for a business. So it's more of that. I'll
Hmm.
go and work out my idea. You don't wait to have a light bulb moment. Go and get stuck into trends, have a look, travel, see what sort of do the homework and sort of make that bit happen. Um, and then for the flavors, it was I didn't just want to put a twist on a spiced rum and go, I'll add this, a citrusy thing or a spice or a something.
Hmm.
And then I thought, if I make a list of all the flavors I love, primarily from childhood, there's got to be something there. So with like a lot of these things, it was like, well, let's work it out. And like with the go into a bar and ask if they want a lemony vodka, a lot of these thoughts and questions you have, it's like, well, de-risk the chances of my lemon vodka business not working by going and finding out the answer and like talking to someone.
Hmm.
And for the flavors, it was where if I work it out, start with the flavors you love and go from there. So I literally wrote a list and it was dairy milk whole nut, Kinder Bueno was at the top, Snickers, Florentines, sticky toffee pudding,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then Frangelico, and sort of all of these flavors. And it's like, nutty, chocolatey, and then um, I wanted it to work sort of in the mind so that when you read a menu, like just a food menu, and it's like, oh, I can imagine the confit duck with the red wine jus. Like you're already there mentally.
Yeah.
And my issue is some drinks. If something is like, keep coming back to like if it's like yuzu and kumquat or something, sounds exotic. I want to try a little bit of it, but there's zero mental connection. There's no nostalgia. There's nothing. I don't know what the phrase for that is, but as soon as you hear like a toasted hazelnut rum with notes of chocolate, you're like, oh, Nutella, Ferrero Rocher. Like
Yeah.
there's your sort of mental imagery for conjuring up what that's gonna like taste like is huge. And as soon as you get those sort of feelings going of that sort of nostalgia, you read hazelnut rum espresso martini, you're like, boom, I'm already there. I can taste
Yeah,
it. So
for
it was
sure.
coming up with something that had that had that like impact when you read it. And also another sort of Venn diagram for both of the rums, but I started off with just the hazelnut. It needed to work neat. It needed to work with the top two mixers of ginger beer and Coke. And also like a raft of classic cocktails, your espresso martinis, your old fashions. And also the flavors needed to be in such a way that because I was thinking if you try something neat and it's the perfect level of flavor, if you put it in a mixer or a cocktail, surely the flavor is going to be
Mm.
too washed out. Or something that is perfect in a cocktail or mixer is going to be way too intense neat.
Hmm.
So that was one of the challenges of how do you have something that is great neat, but then the flavors you introduce and the drinks you sort of put it in like amplifies it. So when you
Yeah.
put it with like a ginger beer and you think, well, that's surely got to wipe it out, it just brings the flavors out and you get this really like nutty
But you
ginger
can get
drink.
it
Oh,
wrong.
great.
There's a
Yeah.
whiskey that I drink, which is a peanut butter whiskey, and it's really nice straight. But I think, yeah,
Mm.
if you don't want to put any more sweetness in that at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also not coming from a rum background, so sort of operations. So, used to run a factory that put, oil in big drums or glass bottles, and putting rum in a glass bottle is, the same process. So operationally, I knew what I was doing, even though I partnered with a firm who could, actually do the bottling. But coming from I've always loved food and loved drinks, but coming from a non-rum background, I think maybe, gave me, some inspiration, a bit of edge to be like, you know, coming from a place of like, what could a rum be like? And I was like, why can't it sort of look as cool as a craft gin and taste as great as a single malt?
So
Like,
when we met, I think you
where's
said something like it's either
mm,
pirate or something else. Like that's
yeah,
the
it's
vibe
like
people go
piratey or
for.
old man.
Oh
Yeah,
man, or pirate. That's what you said to
yeah.
me. Yeah.
And it was like, so having that sort of, I don't know whether you call it naivety or edge, but of like, I'm not entrenched in the category. Um, so what would I like to see in a, you know, in a rum, and loving, and I made, when I had the brand designer that did the final bottle, I made like two, like they were like 30-page Word docs of like brands I love and any sort of reason or thoughts as I could give as to why, and then and brands I hated. And I love that sort of, that Woodford Reserve sort of, you got the secondary label, and sort of, it's, the top label is very simple in its design. And then the bottom label, if you want to get stuck into, a bit more about, how it's made, or, how sweet it is, it's sort of all on there. Um, so I think, yeah, for the flavors and then the design, coming from a non-rum background and non-spirits, it was quite, I don't know, I guess it created something quite refreshing and different that then stood out because, I haven't been in the rum industry for a decade, so you don't make a copycat product. You're like, why not make a hazelnut rum?
Yeah.
So it worked out coming from that, the naivety of, you know, what can we do?
There's two things there that you were saying on that.
Yeah.
One, and we've not covered this in a podcast before, so this is what I really love, is the
Mm,
way I like the way you think, and I like the way you realize you've got to get used to having ideas. Because
mm,
people's light bulb moment, they think it's the best, the first light bulb moment, they're like, this is my baby. It's the best idea I've ever come up with. And
yeah,
maybe it's the idea they've ever come up with, but it's still a bad
yeah,
idea. And
yeah,
what you've got to
yeah,
get used to doing is being intellectually honest with yourself and
yeah,
learning how to have an idea, validate that idea, vet that idea, and be okay to chuck it away. You've got to be
yeah,
okay to walk away.
yeah,
And that's what's so great about what you said. And understanding, I don't know if you understood it at the time, but how important the naivete is. Being naive,
yeah,
like the more naive you are, is a good thing because you
yeah,
do things and push things where people be like, "That's not the way we do it." So that's where
yeah,
innovation happens within that naivety. But
yeah,
the way you approached ideas is the way I try and do it. It is like
yeah,
you got to get used. You got to work those muscles, those idea
yeah,
muscles. Like the first
yeah,
idea is probably the worst idea, and you
yeah,
probably think it's a
yeah,
good idea because you're not used to having ideas. And
exactly. Yeah,
so
yeah,
keep having ideas, keep vetting them,
yeah,
keep talking to people, get out of the office, go into a
yeah,
bar, go into a place, ask questions, and then
mm,
get that feedback and be intellectually honest with yourself with that
mm,
feedback.
yeah, definitely. And I think that's a massive thing because, and especially is, I love the way you put it. Like, if people aren't used to having ideas, they really fall in love with the first idea they have, even if it's not great. And
Yeah.
you've got to get super honest with yourself. And I remember having, early ideas, and I was like, oh, maybe it can be like the brand could be like a man on a horse, like on a horseback, like raising up a glass. And at the moment, you think, oh yeah, I'm gonna call it Noble Vodka, and then like you realize this is absolute trash. Get it in the bin. But like you've got to learn to, yeah, like critically analyze your ideas, and like you see it so much where people fall in love with what they've created and have way rose tinted spectacles, and you can figure out, does anyone else care about this thing I've made, or do I like it? But it's just, there's only me who likes it. So I think, yeah, it's
That's a
a
hard balance, like because I've spent most of my life designing, and so
mm,
the worst clients are always like someone who's like, "Oh no, I just want it just like this." It's like
mm,
because they're
yeah,
not trusting the professional to try and come up with the best
yeah,
idea. You want to hear
mm,
that the best clients do give you tons of reference material, which is what you sounds like you did to your designers.
yeah,
It's like this is the type of stuff
yeah,
that I like.
yeah,
fantastic. Because if someone says just do whatever, impress me or something, that's not good. So
yeah,
again, you've really built the muscle of learning how to lead and learning how to leverage professionals accordingly
yeah.
without being like, because like I said, the worst clients were ones that would say, "Oh, I want it like this," and it just looked
Mhm.
like word art from Word,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
like yeah, it's just going to look like garbage, you know. And
yeah,
so it was good that it sounds like you've built up a skill there of like learning how to bring reference material together to take put your injection and your passion and your likes into
yeah.
it, but at the same time hand it over to be made good by
Yeah,
someone.
definitely. And I guess two parts, learning what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, but then on the back of that, as soon as you tell yourself you're weak at something, like you won't even try. And like I would have said, "Oh, I'm not creative at all. I'm terrible at marketing." But then there are some things where I've been quite good at creativity. So I think, yeah, trying to find that balance as to, yeah, when you hand it over to the professionals, but also trusting that you can come up with some sort of good ingredients for it. So
Mm.
well, the initial branding agency didn't go well. That's a story for another time. The
And that's when
person
we
that
were talking about them, how to deal with those guys, weren't we? As well, I think in the end,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the lady that I went with, she was fabulous, and she got it. She'd worked for a massive like drinks distributor as well. So it wasn't just the creativity that she had. She also understood like technically what can go down the production line if the thickness of the paper is too much, it won't adhere to the bottle, it'll start peeling off before it's stuck. Like she got it from both ends of
Mm.
creativity and technical. Um, and I remember giving her, yeah, these big pages and going into as much detail as I could as to why I loved or hated each of these brands, and giving her some very wide goalposts of like, um, it's going to be drunk in, urban areas. We're talking London, Manchester. It's going to be cocktails, millennials, espresso martinis. A second point is the people you think are going to drink it and how and where is likely going to be different to what actually happens. But when I was intending, creating it, so sort of gave these sort of quite wide parameters of what I wanted it to be, um, and then sort of all of these brands. And then yeah, the first meeting we had then, she'd come up with sort of three different designs, and we literally it was like that game where you sort of fold the top over and the bottom up, and I was like, I love the middle of that, folded this one down, the bottom of that, and the top of that, and we literally like put the three together, and it was like that's the bones of it, and
You're
then a
right.
couple of
You're right.
refinements, and that was
You
it.
don't have to be the professional, a designer, but you're the director.
Yeah,
I often say like a
yeah,
CEO or a founder is the director of the movie. So, we
yeah,
have directors who need to be able to write a little bit. They need to be able to critique why a writing is good or why it's bad. But ultimately,
yeah,
you're bringing in a director's situation, you're bringing the cinematographers, the focus
yeah,
pullers, the audio people, everyone that's good in what they do, and then
yeah.
applying your vision on top of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's what you seem to have done well.
And the thing like social media posts, I would say that's not my skill set, hand it over to a professional. But my posts would be, you know, they'd be quite simple. It would be like, it's a rainy night, why not make a hazelnut rum hot chocolate? Like they'd be very, very basic, very sort of straight to the point. None of this sort of bells and whistles that you'd expect from sort of, marketing team. But then I sort of think, well, is that my sort of edge? Is that my USP that I don't talk like other brands? I'm sort of,
Hmm.
it's just,
Matter of
you know,
fact.
yeah, if you want like a delicious, Manhattan with a hazelnut riff, try this tonight. Like,
Yeah.
just sort of simple. And then, so I still have that thing of like, do I try and be all zhuzh and have sort of a big personality for the brand, which can work fantastically for some brands, and you can imagine what that brand would be as a person, and it has a whole personality of itself, or is your sort of edge that you're a bit more simple and just like if you want something delicious and really special, have a honey and fig old fashioned with the spiced fig rum, and I still don't know which is best, and it's different for each brand, but
But it
yeah,
also comes to necessity. So what's your opinion? Because on this, I have like when I talk to startups and advise startups, people say, well,
Yeah.
I'm not an accountant, so I can't, I can't work out what my expenses are, or I can't
Yeah.
create a financial projection because I've never done that, or I'm not a marketing person, so I don't know how to manage the social media. And of
Yeah.
course, we don't have money at the beginning to hire all these
Mm,
professionals, so you
mm,
have to do it yourself. So,
mm.
what's your opinion generally on the balance of when you're doing stuff yourself, when it's time to hand it over, what you're doing is good enough?
Um, I think I knew from sort of day one, there was the decision of, do I, distill these products in my own bathtub so it's like uber craft, but then I can't scale, or do I find a really good partner that that can bottle the product for me that is like BRC double A, so you can still use great ingredients, but you lose a little bit of that. This has been handcrafted by me, but then you have scale. So I went with the latter one. So that was one piece of the puzzle. And then the other one was, yeah, I wanted accountants from day one, just because, well, partly it's not my skill set, but you can't afford to get, any of the big numbers or the annual accounts wrong. So that was another one that was, I'm not going to try and do my own VAT returns. There's other stuff I should spend my time on. So you still need, an element of understanding for sort of finance and day to day. And then production, I knew that, that was what my background was in. And, so you can manage that, the third party well. And if looking back, if I didn't know all of the things from my background, would have had so many issues, like with third party, because you know what to look out for. If there's a bubbling label, it's a roller issue. You just the 100 things to look out for, and you hear so many like stories of batches of product that are wrong. So thankfully, that was the bit that I had to worry about the least, because I knew what to sort of flag up. So sales and marketing were the things that I didn't really have any experience in massively. So they were the weakest areas and where I needed to focus. Um, and then I knew, the first bit of money I would have, um, I would hire a PR firm. So I had a PR firm, yeah, like March last year, because I'd got a Waitrose listing the October before, and that was the first time I had a PR firm for like the first 6 months of the business to sort of, kick it off and sort of get the name out there. But then that was the first time of I had a proper big listing to push, and sort of with PR, you know, you can try and do it yourself, and sometimes that works well because journalists like talking to founders, but it's like a whole job in itself. And
Hmm.
also, I'm not the best at like shouting about my brand. Like you just feel a bit embarrassed.
You're
Whereas,
British, don't you know?
yeah, exactly. Whereas like someone external can be like, this is the best rum since rum was invented. Get this in your espresso martini. If you're not, you're an idiot. Like
Yeah. And you're like,
you could,
okay.
yeah, you could judge it up and talk about it. So when people are reading it, they're like, yeah, I want to try that.
I feel like this
But
product must
yeah,
go down really well in Waitrose. Is that it? What retailers have you got? Direct to consumer for your website and then
so
Waitrose?
I don't sell through my website. That was another thing that early days it was, do I want to put my time and effort and money into a D2C system, or do I want to do it elsewhere? And when I was getting going, I didn't even know there were these like fulfillment houses
Yeah.
that can, fulfill your online orders and stuff. I thought, "Oh, I don't want to be going to the post office every day. I need to do bigger stuff." But then even when, you get to know all these fulfillment houses, it's like, do some people, a D2C channel can be like the backbone of a brand and it's vital, or it can be the icing on the cake and it adds a little bit. And I never thought it would be the backbone for me. Um, I thought it would be the icing. It's like, don't want to spend a lot of time, and when there's website issues and fulfillment and any returns or anything, I was like, it's just not for me. And trying to think back, because as soon as you sort of get into this world and you learn so much about how it works, you forget what it's like to be Joe Blogs. So I would like think back to, before this, when did I ever buy any alcohol online? Like never, like one bottle of Frangelico ever or something. And if I ever did buy anything online, it would always be Amazon. Like, so the idea of doing D2C through my own website, I was like, it's such a tiny fraction of, the sales I'm likely to get will be through that channel. Where some brands it's super important for, but even some fairly chunky brands that now just direct to Amazon because it's just not worth it for them. So that
Hmm.
was an call of like knowing what to say no to, partly based on what the reward and return would be, and also where
Hmm.
my skill set was. And it's like I'd have to learn everything for a very small reward. Like I don't think that's right.
Mate, you've got
And
an inbuilt
I
SWOT
know.
analysis in your head. Again, like this is
Yeah,
not common.
yeah,
People try and spread themselves too thinly, so it's such
yeah,
smart decisions.
yeah.
So you're in Waitrose right now, right?
Yes, yeah. So I've got
Anywhere else?
104 Waitrose stores. Um, just the hazelnut rum. I've sent in a sample of the spiced fig and blackberry.
That's the new
Um,
one, is it? When did
let's
that come
try,
out?
yeah. And I've got another product. Can't tell you what it is.
Mhm.
I'll tell,
Oh, can we get an
can't tell you
exclusive?
what it is yet. New
Oh,
product as well. But so yeah, that I've developed
is
as
it going to be
well.
another rum or is it going to be something completely different? Can you say that?
It's not just another 40% ABV rum. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that and had I think Selfridges was my first customer. I got that in March 2019. And that was another one of like people go, oh my God, how do you get in Selfridges? And I sort of just like thought about it for a while. And do you try and like target them on LinkedIn or go to some, I don't know, meet the buyer event where you can try and see them? And I thought, well, if I manage to get in touch directly with the buyer, they're actually pummeled with samples, the likelihood of getting, listed would be tiny. And also, if I did get listed, the guy on the floor selling it isn't going to know what it is or anything about it. So, sort of
Hmm.
traction will be slow. So, I thought, well, I'm just going to go into the store and chat to them. And I was looking, and this was a few months still before I'd launched. So I was, interested in what other runs they had and the paper stock before we finalized that. And the guy came over and he was like, "Oh, can I help you?" And I was like, I'm just having a look. I'm launching my own rum company in a few months." And he was like, "That's awesome." And so we'd like chat a little bit, and he was like, "Oh, you need to meet my boss." So I'd meet his boss, and they'd be like, "Sweet, that's awesome. Do you want to bring us some samples?" And I was like, "Yeah." So they tried it, then their boss tried it, and then they're like, "This is brilliant. Like, can we get it in?" And I was like, "Well, if you could like let your buyer know and like send a message, that'd be amazing." They're like, "Yeah, sure." So I did that with a couple of the Selfridges, and then I got a request for a sample from Selfridges by one of my distributors, being like, "Can Selfridges have a sample?" I was like, "Of course." So coming with like an internal referral from their, head of drinks, to the buyer, they're going to pay attention to them a lot more than me. And then if it did get listed, um, the person on the floor knows me. So a lot of the things I've done have been like, just sit down and figure out, what makes sense. Because, I've never sold into Waitrose or Selfridges before, and people might think, oh, that's super daunting. You've got to be, have a degree in procurement to do that or been in it for decades. And it's like a lot of the things like that seem super complex, then they're not super complex. Just think about how it makes sense for you to do it. And if you were the buyer, what would you appreciate? It's like, well, I'd want an internal referral from someone who'd tried it in my team and I could trust them. And if I was on the shop floor, I was like, I would have liked the person to come in and chat to me, and that would make it sell. So you can sort of work out a lot of the things, and you don't just need to do, the standard route to trying to get listed.
Hmm.
Um, you can sort of think differently, and then yeah, because it's different, it might actually work because it's not just what everyone does, and it doesn't really work, and it's sort of a saturated route. So sort of just having a good think about how something could work or how you'd like it to work can like be really useful, and no one else is doing it like that. Um, so yeah, I hope that point makes some kind
No,
of sense.
it did, and like
Yeah,
again, the way you approached it is so brilliant. Like I said, you've got this. I don't know if you know this about yourself, but you've got this inbuilt SWOT analysis, this very strategic brain. Again, I've got
mm,
little exercises I sometimes do with people to help them think about strategy. Like, okay, is that a heavy lift, a light lift, and what's the
yeah,
resources needed to go and do that? And that Selfridges play was so good because
mm,
yeah. we all know, like, if you want to talk to somebody, like, and you look on my LinkedIn, you say, "Oh, well, Matt's connected to them," and you say, "Matt, do you actually know
Yeah,
this person?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can intro." And in the intro, it's so much warmer. It's a warm
yeah,
intro,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
you sort of intrinsically did that, but then also you created a fan, an evangelist for yourself. And when we were talking
yeah,
about when you came to see me at Virgin, one of the things I
yeah,
talked about was evangelists and early adopters and innovators. So
yeah,
you built a
yeah,
fan day one waiting in the store.
yeah,
So I bet you as soon as
yeah,
that first shipment came in, they were
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I did
They were
this.
like, oh
You know,
yes, the guy
I did
came in.
that. I know
He
Edmund,
cares
he's a friend of
about.
mine.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's here because of me. And you want that. You want
yeah,
them to
yeah,
have that ownership over it.
yeah,
And then I bet you, like, if you're a fly on the wall, we might see is that someone goes in there and said, "Oh, I'm thinking of buying a present for somebody." Like, oh,
yeah,
there's this great rum
yeah,
over here.
yeah. I
Come
met the
and see this thing
guy. Yeah, he
because
came,
they
and I
feel
love.
more attached to it.
Exactly. And I love, like, when you look at a problem, I love problem solving. And when you look at a problem, I love sort of, if you look at where you want to be, where you are, and then sort of backtrack, and then you've got the roadmap to it. So in order for it to get listed, the buyer needs to try it. You know, the best way would be if they had internal referral. So you've got to, and then you just literally then you've got the roadmap. Sweet, go speak to that guy, get the referral. So I love sort of building up those sort of processes. And for the Waitrose one, we'd emailed a little bit, and then I went to the Waitrose Drinks Festival, an annual thing, and just went as a customer. And I could only be there for a very short amount of time, because I had to do like a rum Zoom, and it was like 40 quid, and I only half an hour there or something. But the objective was to chat to the buyer. I said, I'll be there. It'd be lovely to see you. And it was to let him know that I knew a bunch of the other brands and I wasn't this complete unknown. And I'm like, I'm in maybe not the inner circle because I'm not in Waitrose yet, but I was in the outer circle. I know Moth, I know Skylark, I know Vivere, and just to sort of demystify, because the massive thing for him, he gets 1,000 brands a day. Which of these, which of these brands and products are any good, and just trying to like de-risk it in his mind, like, is that company even going to still be here in a year? Are they robust? If we stock them, can they keep up? And sort of letting him know, I'm in that circle. I know all these guys, and just sort of, demystify it, de-risk it, and be like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, Ed's in the club. Because that's what I would want if I was him. Some massive unknown, even if the product tastes great, it's just that, does it even stack up? Who is this person? Like, there isn't that sort of trust, and you're not relaxed about it. Whereas it's like, they're in the club. This makes sense.
That's the other thing that people forget. They think if they were going to make a rum company, that their
Mm.
customer. And you said about who your drinker is, and I want to come back and ask you who you thought
Yeah,
your drinkers were going to be and who they are now.
yeah,
But you think
yeah,
that's your customer, but they're not. They're your consumer. Your
yeah, yeah,
customer
yeah,
is
yeah,
Waitrose. Your customer
yeah.
is
Mm,
Selfridges. So what
mm,
are the pains they have? What are the risks to them? What are
yeah,
the jobs they need to do? Well, the job is they
yeah,
need to stock variety of drinks. Okay, what are the
mm,
pains? People not being able to supply enough to it or not doing enough of their own
yeah,
content creation because you do fantastic content creation. You say, look, it can be an old fashioned, it can be
yeah,
an espresso martini, and you give them the content so they can use that.
mm,
So you're thinking about how you're solving your customer's problem. Now, getting to the consumer is a job and is a thing you need to do, but it's
yeah,
different. And you've thought
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, 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 and it is. Yeah, once you sort of, you then realize, I'm selling to, well, you're selling to three people. You're selling, well, sometimes like you've got the
Mhm.
distributor before it goes to Selfridges, and then it goes to the customer, and or it's direct to Waitrose and then customer. And yeah, figuring out, and or if you approach someone and they're not interested, it might be because great run, but they happen to have too much at that price point,
Mhm.
or there's like so many other things, and it might just be, nothing to do with your product, but in the future it might be better, or like a certain supermarket that their customers, they're not so au fait with making cocktails yet, but in 6, 12 months, there might be. So you might not need to change the product. You just need to wait a bit
Yeah.
until people are, a bit more restless with gin and want to switch to something else, and a bit more sort of comfortable with making cocktails. Because it is like, I can like make cocktails now and I'm quite comfortable with it. But
Hmm.
thinking back to Joe Bloggs, Ed, like I'd feel like a lemon with a shaker. Like, what am I doing? Like, you feel
Yeah.
silly. And like, you'd be like, oh, my mates will think I'm silly. Like, what are you, some kind of bartender? Like, people have these barriers to
Yeah.
shaking a cocktail because, you don't want to cover yourself in it. You just don't want to look lame.
Well,
Like,
it's
if
kind of
you're on
it's
a
a
beer
bold
kick.
statement, isn't it? That that is a bold.
Yeah, you're like, hey, look at me. And it's like, oh, not cool. So it is all of these little barriers and, that sort of peer sort of embarrassment thing beyond just, can you make it? And they might be, more than capable of making a drink if they just, in by themselves one night. But all of those little things that are at play and people are a bit too shy to make a drink.
Hmm.
So sort of, that customer thing needs to develop and also the category as, gin goes down and rum goes up. Um, so there's a load of bits
Well,
like that. But
there's something to be said there with the perseverance. Like, there's getting started, which is the first thing, and trying to
yeah,
avoid as many pitfalls as you did. And then
mm,
it's just about sticking around and keep doing it, keep turning
yeah,
up every day.
yeah,
Because like you
yeah,
say, the
yeah,
market is shifting, people's opinions shift, stock
yeah,
shifts, whatever. And like
yeah,
people just want overnight success. And
yeah, yeah,
like I said, we've known each other for 7 years. And I
yeah,
typically say, like, I think one day I've got a book in me, which is the 10-year overnight success. And so,
yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
going to take you a long time. That's why you do have to
yeah,
enjoy the craft of building a business, not just
exactly.
how cool your rum is or your peanut butter or whatever. You need
Yeah.
to care about what you're building as a business.
And I knew it needed to be sustainable. And I'm not talking about, is it green? I'm talking about sustainable, not just financially, but like for you mentally,
Yeah.
like you can't, there's another sort of not maybe not glamorized, but like classic thing of, oh, you got to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's like that might work for short bursts for some people in some companies, but I knew if I did that, I'd burn out and I'd, conk out. Like I knew it needed to be sustainable for like, at least like on the scale of like a 5 year period, 8, 10 year period. Um, so in
It's a
terms
marathon,
of,
not a sprint. I mean,
yeah,
like you say, there's
100%.
times to sprint. There's okay, we've got to get this
Mm,
out before this cycle or whatever. I'm
yeah,
not sure when your new
yeah,
product came out, but I presume before Christmas.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
going to be a time to sprint, and there's a time
Yeah,
to
exactly.
yomp. Just
Yeah, exactly.
run
And I
and
try and
walk.
be quite diligent with working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, unless it's, as you say, something's on and I need to do a weekend or, or something. But there is, yeah, just still being around and knowing. And my sort of strategy from the beginning was like, keep it small, keep, overheads low, get some like independent local retailers to home, which is a Lake District. So you can keep the bills getting paid, keep the lights on, because I knew to get one of the step change things that might come in 6 months, it might be 24 months. I've just got to still be here. And when I get that big order,
Hmm.
boom, that's then I can then justify a massive production run, but just still being around. And I didn't want to sort of, try and grow too aggressively. You don't get the big break and you run out of money. So I've grown far smaller than some firms and other ones that will have, they'll have managed to catch all the waves and do that, and others that have, run out of cash. So I sort of slow and steady I've done. Um, that's my sense. And the other thing that because I used to think, starting a business or seeing Pip with hers, being like, how do you go from 0 to 1 just to having a business? Like, it just seems so like complex how you do it. Um, I used to think, like driving a car, like, how do you drive it? And it's with both of them, you just got to like build up all of these pieces, understand each element. So I think of it sort of like for a business, like a jigsaw, like find your corners, like and
Hmm.
then sort of the edges then start filling it in. So it's like, you've got to come up with a product. Obviously, that's the massive thing that's at the center of it. But like, I need to find a bottler. I need to find, an ingredient supplier. I need a glass manufacturer, a label supplier, a designer. I need a haulier, a warehouse. And then you look at, okay, what kind of licensing do I need? I need a wholesalers. I want a duty suspension one, so I don't have to pay the duty till it's ready to sell. Like,
Hmm.
you just sort of dig and dig and dig, talk to people, and you start to build up this sort of jigsaw. And
And
before
you
too
learn
long,
along the
like,
way, right? Because you
yeah,
were said about the warehouse, and it's called a bonded warehouse, isn't it? Where
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
want to keep it in there so you don't pay the tax until you sell it. So
yeah,
and that's the difference between growing sustainably. like you said,
yeah,
because you could have gone, sod it, I'll just pay the tax straight away. But now you're out of
yeah,
pocket. And that might
yeah,
be
yeah,
okay because you think you've got lots of cash in the bank, but then how is
yeah,
that gonna affect
yeah,
you if there's a small change in the market or a delay in
yeah,
an invoice, you know?
yeah, exactly. And that sort of um that like you can figure it out, you can talk to people, and also there's like a couple of people who like I think I've even probably said to them like they won't know how valuable their sort of input has been. Pip is one. Another one is the lady behind Kin Toffee Vodka, really big in the lakes, but fairly chunky. Um, and it was like I've got loads of questions about distributors and how the whole thing works. And this was before I'd even come up with the product for sure. And she'd won an award in the Lake District. I thought, I'll email her, see if I can chat to her. The worst she can say is no, like you'll be a
Yeah.
competitor. Um, and she replied back and she's like, yeah, of course I'll chat to you. I know who you are. My sister used to play with your mum when they were kids.
Uh-huh.
Like these little leaps of faith of they might say no, but they might say yes and unlock some doors. And people, are usually so willing to help, even direct
Hmm.
competitors, like just because they like doing it. And I like doing it now since I got somewhere. People ask me, and I'm like, of course I'll help you. Because they're just a couple of rungs behind on the ladder and a few people a couple of rungs ahead. So that lady, she sort of demystified the whole world of contract bottling and distributors and hauliers. And another time, uh, in a bar in King's Cross, and was just sort of looking at the rum, and I just asked the guy about it. And he was like, "Oh, here, have a try it, just like for free, like have a little try." I was like, "Thanks, man." And then the next day, I was thinking, "Oh, I still need to understand distributors and how they work and pricing models." So I thought, I'll go back and I'll ask them. So I went back in. I was like, "Hey, I was here having a beer with my mate yesterday. I don't know if you remember. It's not a rum company. I wondered if I could chat to you." And I was like, "Yeah, of course you can." So we chatted for like ages, and then he was like, "If you want me to like try any of your samples, give you some feedback, I will." And there was three mates who owned this bar, and I thought it was almost too good to be true. I was like, "Are they going to try and rob the recipe or something?" But no, they were just it was just I'd struck gold, and it was three guys, and Marco was exceptional. He had this fantastic palate for flavors.
Hmm.
So each time I had a new sample of hazelnut rum, um, would go there with like three different samples, make three different cocktails, and they'd help me through it. And and then come back with the next iteration and sort of, yeah, reaching out to people, and so many people who really wanted to help, and just sort of like I'd love to help, um, you know, people sort of start their own businesses by helping to sort of like demystify it and like
Yeah.
it's not impossible. You don't need an MBA. You can figure out a lot of it. It's possible.
The
That's my
MBA
sort
is
of
you doing it.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and I think that this is getting to the heart of what entrepreneurship is actually about. It's
yeah.
about actually like me and you have been friends for 7 years now, and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we don't talk every single week or anything like that. But we always we're talking about how we keep up with each other, and we want to
yeah,
be there for other people. And the reason I'm doing these podcasts, we don't monetize any of this stuff. It's because it's
yeah,
enjoyable to keep the
yeah,
conversation going about something we're all passionate about. Some of
yeah,
us build software, some of us make rum companies, but it's all
yeah,
related and fun and
yeah,
enjoyable. And these relationships now you just wouldn't get it just working in a
yeah,
normal office or a
yeah,
normal job.
exactly.
This is what entrepreneurship's about. It's the
Yeah,
swashbuckling kind of
yeah,
relationship building. And people are often scared as well about telling people their ideas in the beginning. Like when I used to do
yeah,
the Virgin stuff, if you remember, we would go around the room and say, "What are you working on? What are you working on? What are you working on?" And
yeah,
I'd use that as a way to use people as analogies and stuff because it helps us learn. And some people would say,
yeah,
I can't tell you." I was like, "Well, if you can't
yeah,
tell me, then I can't help you." But
yeah,
like
yeah,
the thing is, you know how hard it was, like to get started and to do it.
yeah,
So what the
yeah,
chances are someone isn't going to do it and have the passion for it. I mean, it does happen, of course, but
yeah,
like
yeah,
the risks are so low, really, of someone just
yeah,
copying it unless they really
yeah,
had to do it. And even
yeah,
if it was one of your big competitors, one of the maybe it was like Captain Morgan, and you say or
yeah,
whatever, in a Bacardi, they're not
yeah,
just going to go and change their production run and slip some nuts
yeah,
flavoring in there.
yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's going to come much
the
later.
funny thing is, because like early days when people were asking me, what it was, there were very, very few people who knew what the idea was, because I knew that, you know, I knew mates wouldn't like, divulge it to Mr. Diageo, but if they chatted to someone else, oh, my mate's starting a rum company, like, you know, before too long, someone might find out, and Diageo could, make it overnight or something. So there were very few people, and I remember one guy, who was a distributor, and I was like, I can't tell you yet, and he was like, that is a very good marketing ploy. And I'm like, it's not a marketing ploy. I'm just not telling anyone yet. So then this big reveal, and the bottling company where I used to work, that parent company, huge firm that owns Dead Man's Fingers. And a year after I produced my hazelnut rum on their production lines, they came out with a hazelnut rum. And I'll never know for sure, but yeah, so that made me think, oh, it was good to sort of keep it quiet.
Yeah, there's definitely
But then,
elements, trade secrets you should keep quiet, but
yeah.
you need to go into a bar and talk to people. You have to
Oh,
divulge some
100%.
information.
Yeah, it's just that like cost benefit analysis, when to shout about it and when to keep it quiet. And then but I knew if what I made was any good, it would be copied. I just wanted a head start and to be the
Yeah.
first. And I remember buying a bottle of it and dreading that it was going to be delicious and and it was like cheaper, and it wasn't that great. And I was so incredibly relieved because I thought, they've got millions of pounds and people, it's going to somehow be better. But it wasn't. And I was super relieved. And because I knew I would never beat competitors on price because of economies of scale, um, I'd have to be superior on taste and a great looking brand. So brand and taste and like quality of product I could win on. And yeah, it would come with a high price point. I wouldn't be able to play in the more budget end. Um,
And
so
competitors
yeah,
are a good thing. It validates your idea further. Their
yeah,
marketing will spill over into you as well. Because they'll
yeah,
say, oh,
yeah,
I've
yeah,
heard of that flavored one. And then
yeah.
they'll come and
If
look at it on
someone
a
did
shelf and
like,
say, oh, well, maybe they might get confused and buy yours,
yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah,
or they'll try both and go, oh, I didn't like that other one. I like this one,
yeah. But
so
if
it
they
does help.
search hazelnut rum on Amazon, mine will show up as well. So
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
exactly. So
Um,
one of my last questions was like, you said that you had this hypothesis of who was your drinker, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
things changed. So how did that change?
Yeah, going into it, and that's another thing of being like with the brand in general or your consumer, you've got to, um, yeah, be like prepared to throw out what you thought your consumer was and just learn from it. And so part of it was just like who like engages massively in like the Spice Rum Club on Facebook because they've been like amazing and supportive, and also your Facebook, Instagram analytics. And I thought it would like just be millennials and just urban areas, and I thought it'd be quite unisex. Um, it was older than I thought by a few years, sort of 35 to 55, I'd say, is the bracket. Very, very wide in general, which was a good thing. It makes
Mhm.
it sort of easier to market to because you sort of talk to everyone, but then also really hard because you can't really make it niche, bespoke, and talk how a 40-year-old man talks. So it broad, but the curve is sort of 35 to 55, and that's sort of yeah, that 40-45 period is probably where the most common is. So older than I thought. I
Mm.
thought we'd like just be millennials. Um, and it still is quite split, female, male, maybe maybe like 60-40 male or even 55-45 male, female. So
I could see that.
um that was quite similar because I wanted the products to look and have like a unisex appeal in their look and their taste, and it not be specifically, a
For some
man's
reason,
drink.
rum
Or
feels more male and gin does feel more female. I don't know what
yeah,
that
it
is. I
definitely
love gin,
does. Yeah,
but
I love gin as well, but they have
yeah,
those sort of category images. But yeah, no, it's been yeah pretty even. Um, which has been, I mean, great. That was the idea of making it sort of unisex and sort of appealing
yeah.
to all.
It looks really great and premium. So you bought out the new flavor. What's next
Yeah.
for you guys, do you think? Slow and steady,
Well,
continuous, new retailers?
well, I'd love to get, I'd love to get the Spice Fig and Blackberry into Waitrose. That would be a dream. To get more stores. So I'm in like a third of their stores at the moment. But if I could get the other rum in and more stores, that would be awesome. And then I've got this other product, can't disclose yet, to grow or to get it out there, sorry, then grow it, but also more export as well. I'll hopefully, um, I've got what was hopefully a Chinese importer soon, and a couple of other European ones. So there's a few sort of getting close. So that would be good because if, that can help sort of change things with, cost of goods. If you've got some, reliable chunky amount of stock going out, that, unlocks some cash that you can then do other things at home with. So, yeah, it'd be good to, grow the
So
UK market,
world
export.
domination, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah,
Pretty fast.
yeah, yeah.
Cool, man. Man, I love
Oh,
learning more about it. Thanks for your time
oh,
today.
pleasure to
We
share
can't
it.
leave it this long again to talk for sure.
Yeah. No, it's been really nice, and it's lovely talking about it because it helps sort of crystallize and
Hmm.
refine my own thoughts. So it helps me. I get a lot out of this because I get to sort of think about the business. I'm sort of working on it and thinking about it rather than in the nitty-gritty, and
Yeah.
sort of, how you make decisions, how you go about problem solving. And if you ever have a doubt, oh, I can't work this out, I'm not creative enough, or I need to outsource it, just have a crack, think about it, work it out. And that's, yeah, the other thought of like, I used to see, entrepreneurs and think, oh, they were born like that with, 20 years of experience. And I'm like, they're just normal people who started doing something. And, there's just like 1,000 steps to building a business.
Hmm.
And it's all possible. Um, and just sort of, get those basic building blocks. And um, and don't be afraid to iterate it. As you say, that's probably one of the biggest things. Like, don't fall in love with something too much that you can't bring yourself to put it in the bin. Like,
Hmm.
always be
Totally.
critical. Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been absolutely delightful, Matt. Really,
Nice
really
one.
enjoyed it. So yeah,
Cool.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.